All right, so this is the third and final part of implementing the functionality of uploading our recipes. And let's start by adding yet another recipe so that I can show you something that is still missing from our controller. So actually, two things. So let's say this one here, test avocado. Okay, just so we have a different name. And watch what happens here to the URL as we upload this recipe. So actually nothing will change. So take a look at that. Okay, so recipe was successfully uploaded. And we also still need to remove this window, right? But anyway, here is the recipe that we just uploaded, but the URL did not change. And also, it did not yet add this new recipe to our bookmarks. Okay, so of course it is bookmarked, right, as you see here, and as you can also see down here, but we didn't yet re-render this bookmarks panel, right? So there are two things that we need to fix. So we need to re-render this bookmarks view, and we also need to change the ID here in the URL, because watch what happens if I reload this page now. So then we are back to the old recipe that was there before. So because that's the recipe that is associated to this ID. So let's go back to our controller and fix these things, and also put back here toggling the window. So let's do that right here. After displaying the success message, we also want to render the bookmark view. And so that will then basically add this new element to the bookmark view dot render. So model dot state dot bookmarks. Okay, and we are not using update here because we really want to insert a new element, and for that we use always render and not the update method. Now the second thing that we wanted to do is to change the ID in the URL, and for that we can use the history API. So let's say change ID in the URL. So we can say window.history, so that is the history API of the browsers. And then on this history object, we can call the push state method. And so this will basically allow us to change the URL without reloading the page. Now push state takes 3 arguments, and this first one here is called the state, which doesn't really matter. You can just specify null. Then the second one is a title, which is actually also not relevant, so we can just use an empty string. And then the one that actually is important is the third one, because this one is actually the URL. And so here we can simply put the hash and then the ID that we want to put onto the URL. So that is at model.state.recipe.id, and that's actually it. And we could also do all kinds of other stuff with the history API, like for example going back and forth, just as if we were clicking the forward and back buttons in the browser. So we could do like this. Of course, it doesn't make sense in this situation, but maybe in some other situation you might find this one helpful. So automatically going back to the last page. So that should work now, but let's not test it yet, because the next thing that we want to do is to refactor these two methods here, these two functions. So getJSON and sendJSON are almost the same right now, and so we can basically put them together just in one function called AJAX, because both of them are being done for doing an AJAX request. So just like this. And then this one will receive the URL and also the upload data, but we will set this one to undefined by default. And so with this, when we call this AJAX function with only the URL, then of course there is no upload data. And then in that case, we can simply define the fetch pro as only this. So let's actually do that. So conditionally defining this fetch pro variable. So fetch pro, and let's test if upload data does exist. So if it does exist, then fetch pro should become this. So let's grab that, put that here. And otherwise, it will simply be this. And that's it. Now, of course, I could have used an if-else statement, but then I would have had to declare this here as a let variable outside, and then change that variable in both the blocks, and that's not really nice. And so now we can basically copy everything else here. Then we don't need this one anymore, and this should go all the way to the top. And that's actually it. So let's comment this one out. Just one final look, but everything looks good here. And so here now we can no longer import this one. Let's just keep it there. And we simply import AJAX. So here, and here, and then down here for upload the recipe, the same thing. Okay, so let's try that. And we see that we still get the recipe. We also get the search. And now finally, let's add another test 23 recipe here. Let's just change it up a little bit. And now again, take a look what happens to the ID here. So you saw that it actually changed. And so now the ID of our new recipe is exactly that one that we have here. And also it should now be a new bookmark. And indeed it is. Okay. And so now if we reload this page, then you see that we are back at this recipe that we just created. Great. But now finally, let's use our keys or key in order to actually mark this recipe here as our own recipe by displaying like a small icon here. And so for that, we need to attach our key to all the API queries. So we can add the key to this one here simply by adding the key, and of course also to this one. So the one which has the ID. So again, at the end, question mark and then the key. Okay, so let's simply get this one here. So this one is for the search results. Let's add this here. And here we already have a parameter. So here it is then end. So search and key. But then, for this one, so for loading the recipe, there is nothing yet there. And so we can simply add our key like this. And so now by adding this key, especially in the search results, it will then load all the recipes, including the ones that contain our own key. So if I search for avocado now, because I have, well, not here in the demo, but in this one, so I created a recipe which contains avocado. And so if I search for avocado now, that should then contain this recipe that I just created. All right. Now, we now want to mark this as our own recipe again, here in the search results and also here. And so let's do that. And just as a side note, again, if you're using your own API key, then of course you will not see this recipe here, because this recipe is linked to my API key. So as we see right here. So this is the key that I am using. All right. And the same here in the results. So here in all the results, you will see that my own one has the key. So this first one, right? So test avocado, it has my key, but the other ones, of course, do not. But anyway, let's now go to the recipe view and also the preview view. So the one responsible for these results, and add the logic there to actually display that small icon there. So we don't need this one anymore, and neither this one. So recipe view and preview view. So the code for that is somewhere there at the top. Here it is. So user generated. And I guess I wrongly deleted some code here earlier. So let's go back to the HTML and copy it back like this. And now the indentation is messed up. Then here we need to replace that with icons once again. And so now all we will do with this element here is to basically add the hidden class if there is no key on the recipe. But if there is a key, then we will add no class. And so then it will become visible. Okay, so that's simply this dot data dot key. So if there is a key, then we want to add no class at all. But if there is no key, then we add the hidden class. Okay, and now the same here in the preview view. And actually here we don't even have that yet. So let's actually grab the same code from the recipe view, because it is almost the same. And let's just see that here to see where we have to paste it. Well, it's not here, so let's just paste it anywhere. So let's put it right here. And then it's probably going to call it preview user generated. All right. Or actually, I think that it is inside of this div here. So let's move that down a little bit. Fix the indentation here once again to make it easier to see. Just like this. All right. And so let's now try it out. So let's search for avocado here again. And then here it is. And you see that now we have this icon here. While if we click some other recipe, then it's not there. All right. Now it's only still missing here, but that is because we actually never added this key to the search data. So let's go back to our model. And so here in the load search results, this is where we create the data that will then be put in the state, right? So state.search.results will become these objects here. And so that only contains ID, title, publisher, and image, but not the key. And so let's grab this code that we used here in order to add the key to the recipe object and do that here as well. Right, then here we just have to change this to rec, just like all the others here. And then with that, we should be good to go. So let's see. Search for avocado one more time. And now it is there. You see? Great. So again, this one does not have the icon, while this one here, of course, now has. So right here. Beautiful. So this is just great. Let me now close this here and create one final, more real recipe here for pizza that we have been using all the time. So let me get rid of all of these weird bookmarks. Oh, and you see that also here we now have this icon, right? And so that's the beauty of using the same preview here in the results and also for the bookmarks, right? So that makes everything really more reusable. What's happening here? Okay. Just getting rid of all of them because these recipes are not really that interesting. So let's now add a super pizza. Then the URL, let's make it jonas.io. So that's https jonas.io. Then let's go to Unsplash and grab some image from there. Just to make this, again, a little bit more real world. So this one here looks quite nice. So let's right click and copy image address. Okay. Then here, Jonas, Schmettmann, prep time 75 minutes, 2 servings. And here let's just use 1 kilogram of flour, then some tomato sauce, and the rest doesn't really matter. Okay, so looks correct. Let's upload it. And it was successful. And here we get the super pizza. Let's see here. And indeed, we can update our servings here. We are in the bookmarks. And if I now search for pizza, then here it appears right at the first position with this beautiful image. And so that means that our application is now basically finished. I just spotted a small bug here. So in this ingredient description, remember that we replaced all the spaces. And so with that, we lost the space between tomato sauce. So let's quickly go fix that, but I will not add another recipe. So we're not going to test this. All I will do is to fix this problem down here. So instead of this replace all here, let's do it differently. So I will split the string into multiple parts, which will then return an array, and then I will loop over that array and trim each of the elements. So map to create a new array. Let's just call it element here, and then just return element.trim, just like this. Okay, and so now if we add just something to test here, so adding some spaces here and maybe here, and here. And so you see, this worked just fine now. Well, now we have 2 recipes for some reason. Not sure why that was, but you see that the spaces that I inserted there, they are gone. Okay, let's remove this one here. I don't want to see that again. And so, yeah, our application is now feature complete. So if we check out our flowchart part 3, everything here is now implemented. And that's just awesome. So congratulations for going through this huge, huge project together with me and making it all the way to the end. And now in the next final lecture of the section, I will just quickly show you how we can write documentations for functions in order to make other people understand our code a little bit better. And then, just like before, I have some final suggestions for you, so like features and improvements that you will be able to implement on yourself if you want to practice your skills. So I hope to see you there soon.